Hi, I'm Emily. I'll be your storyteller today. Many of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Also, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now get comfortable. Close your eyes and let the sound of the rain guide you into the story. I hadn't been back to Hollow Vale in over 12 years. The road leading into town hadn't changed, still lined with pine trees that reached toward the sky like skeletal arms, dripping from the mist of a steady rain. The air was thick and sweet, soaked with the scent of wet earth and moss. My windshield wipers worked in rhythm with the soft patter of raindrops, each sweep briefly revealing the winding country lane ahead. I was here to settle my Aunt Clara's estate. She'd passed alone in that old creaking house by the woods. I hadn't planned to stay long. As I approached the last curve before the turnoff to her property, something strange caught my eye. The narrow country road I remembered had split, or so it seemed, into two paths. One continued as expected, while the other veered off to the right, deeper into the fog, slick with rain and framed by trees I didn't recognize. It wasn't on the GPS. No signs, no name. Just there, like it had always waited. A thin shimmer hovered above its surface, as if the rain itself avoided touching it. I slowed the car, heart thudding softly. Maybe it was a private drive or a fire road, but something about it felt off. Not dangerous, not exactly, but too still. I rolled down the window slightly. The air that rushed in was colder than it should have been, carrying with it a scent I couldn't place. Not pine, not earth. Something older. I stared for a full minute before continuing on the main road, but I made a mental note. I'd come back. I needed to see where that road went. Aunt Clara's house greeted me with silence. The storm followed close behind, draping the world in a curtain of steady rainfall. Inside, the air was stale and humid, like the house had been holding its breath for too long. Dust clung to every surface, and the faint smell of lavender hung in the hall, barely masking something sour underneath. I lit a candle in the kitchen, listening to the wind rattle the glass. That unfamiliar road still lingered in my thoughts, a silent invitation I hadn't accepted yet. Later that night, I found a box of my aunt's old journals tucked away beneath the bedroom floorboards. The top one was dated 1977. Its cover was worn leather, stained in places that looked suspiciously like water damage. I opened it out of curiosity and was greeted with shaky handwriting that began, "There's a road that only appears when it rains." My breath caught. I read it again. The entry continued. "I saw it once, just after James disappeared. No one believes me, but the rain always knows. It shows you what others can't see." I didn't sleep much after that. The storm deepened as the night wore on. Rain tapped against the windows like fingers too impatient to knock. I sat in the living room, wrapped in an old quilt, the journal balanced on my knees. Aunt Clara's words became more fragmented with each page. References to shadows on the road, names I didn't recognize, dates without context. But one line was repeated over and over, almost like a chant. "Don't follow the voice." There were no voices, I told myself. Not yet. Around midnight, the power flickered. The lights buzzed, dimmed, then returned in a blink. I held my breath. For a moment, I thought I heard something in the hallway. Not a creak, not the shifting of an old house. It sounded like movement, soft and slow. I stood, candle in hand, and peered down the corridor. Nothing. Just shadows clinging to corners, the scent of wet stone hanging faintly in the air. I returned to the journal. One entry had been circled in red ink. October 19th. He came to the eye window again, tall, quiet, watching. But it's not James. James is gone. Beneath that, a smudged sketch, a silhouette in the rain, featureless, blurred like a memory you're not supposed to recall. My fingers trembled as I traced it. Was this what she'd seen? A hallucination brought on by grief? Or something more? The storm pulsed steadily through the night, a lullaby soaked in tension. When I finally drifted into sleep on the couch, the journal clutched to my chest. My dreams were filled with roads that twisted impossibly, folding into themselves like mazes. In one, I walked alone beneath endless pine trees as rain poured upward instead of down. Somewhere far ahead, a man stood with his back to me. I never saw his face, but I woke gasping, as if I'd screamed. The morning brought no sun, only gray. Light filtered through a mist that clung to the house like ivy. I stepped outside with coffee in hand and stared down the hill toward where I'd seen the strange road. It wasn't there, just wet grass and a few leaning fence posts. The trees looked the same, but the space was wrong, too still. I turned to go back inside, but something made me stop. A wet footprint at the threshold of the porch. One that wasn't mine. I bent down and touched the footprint. The wood beneath my fingers was damp, but cold in a way that didn't feel natural. Like the chill came from within, not from the rain. It was a bare footprint. No shoe tread, no sock fuzz. Just the shape of a foot, slender and long, pressed into the wood with a slight curve at the heel. I looked around instinctively, but the surrounding yard was empty. No other prints led away. Just that one. As if someone had stepped out of nowhere and then vanished. Inside, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, heart fluttering like a trapped bird. I told myself it could have been from the night before. Maybe I'd stepped out in my sleep, or maybe it was some trick of water pooling. But I didn't believe it. The house felt different now, heavier, like something had noticed me and was waiting. The candle on the kitchen counter had melted into a strange shape overnight, curling slightly to one side, its wax pooled into what looked eerily like an open eye. I needed to get out of the house. I needed answers. Back in town, I stopped at the local archives, a narrow, quiet building that still smelled of mildew and carbon paper. The receptionist barely looked up as I asked for information on local disappearances. "Plenty of folks go missing," she said flatly, sliding a dusty box toward me. "But if you're talking about Highway 47, that's just folklore. Don't let it get in your head." Her tone was dismissive, but her eyes lingered on me too long. A flicker of recognition there, like she knew something she wasn't saying. I carried the box to a corner table and began sifting through the yellowed clippings and faded photographs. Reports stretched back decades. Names, dates, weather conditions. I circled every mention of rain. Nearly all of them happened during storms. Bodies never recovered, cars abandoned with engines still warm, entire families that simply stopped, existing overnight. I found one article with my aunt's name on it, quoted after a disappearance in 1981. She'd said, "It's the road. It comes when it rains, but it only takes those who see it." My fingers trembled as I traced her words. As I left the building, The sky opened up again. Rain fell in slow, deliberate sheets. I stood under the awning, watching it blur the world into a watercolor of greens and grays. Then I saw it. Across the street, where the pavement curved past the hills, the road was there again. Same angle, same trees, same shimmer. It hadn't been visible moments ago. My heart pounded with the rhythm of the rain. I stepped forward, drawn to it like a tide, but a voice behind me broke the trance. "You shouldn't be looking at that road," the man said. "It remembers who you are." I turned to face the speaker. He was tall, with a face that seemed both young and impossibly aged, as if time had worn him thin without breaking him. A dark cap shadowed his eyes, and his coat was soaked through, dripping onto the pavement. I asked him what he meant, but he didn't answer right away. He just looked past me, toward the road, his jaw tightening. "If it's shown itself to you twice," he said slowly, "it means it's waiting." Then he walked off without another word, disappearing into the mist. Back at the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted again. The rain had followed me, settling over the house like a living thing. I dried myself off, changed clothes, and sat back on the couch, Aunt Clara's journal open in my lap. I flipped to the final page. It was blank. But as I stared, faint lines began to appear, words bleeding through as if emerging from beneath the paper. One line formed clearly. "It comes for those who listen." The candle beside me flickered violently, and then went out. I froze, heart hammering, wrapped in a silence so thick it pressed against my ears. Then came the sound. Soft, deliberate. Footsteps, wet and bare, moving slowly across the wooden floor of the hallway. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The sound stopped just behind the wall. I whispered my aunt's name without knowing why. But the only response was the faint creak of a door that hadn't been opened before. I forced myself up, step by step, drawn by something I couldn't explain. At the end of the hallway was the guest room, a door that had always stuck shut. Tonight, it was open a crack. The room beyond glowed faintly, though I hadn't turned on any lights. I pushed the door slowly and saw a single object in the center of the room, a rain-drenched suitcase dripping onto the floor. I stepped closer. A tag hung from the handle. Written in smudged ink, it read my name. Not my aunt's, not someone else's. Mine. Lightning lit up the sky outside as thunder rumbled low and long. I backed away, pulse racing, breath short. My reflection in the hallway mirror looked pale and unfamiliar, eyes wide with something between fear and realization. I closed the door, carefully, not daring to open the suitcase. I knew somehow that opening it would mean accepting something I wasn't ready for. As I turned off the light, the rain intensified. The road was waiting. And part of me, the part I didn't want to admit existed, was thinking of going back. The morning brought no real light, only a dim haze that clung to the windows like a second skin. I sat at the kitchen table, the untouched suitcase resting silently in the guest room down the hall. My coffee had long gone cold, but I hadn't moved. I kept replaying the sound of those footsteps, the damp creaking of wood that still echoed in my bones. Outside, the rain had lessened to a drizzle, but the scent of it lingered in the air, metallic, earthy, charged with something unnatural. I needed to talk to someone. I couldn't keep this in my head. I drove into town just after noon. The streets were nearly empty, as if the rain had sent everyone underground. Most of the storefronts were shuttered, their windows clouded with condensation. I parked near the diner, the same one I used to visit with Aunt Clara when I was a child. Inside, the lighting was warm, but dim, casting long amber shadows across the worn tile floor. Only a few customers sat scattered across the booths, sipping coffee in silence. The waitress, a tall woman with streaks of silver in her braid, eyed me curiously as I approached the counter. "You're Clara's niece, aren't you?" she asked, her voice low and cautious. I nodded, and she gestured to a stool. "Thought so. You look like her. Around the eyes." There was a long pause before she spoke again. "Strange things been happening since she passed." I asked her what she meant, but she didn't answer directly. She just placed a mug in front of me and said, "Storms don't usually linger like this, and that road..." She stopped short, lips pressed tight. "Some things best left alone, honey." I pushed further, telling her about the footprint, the suitcase, even the man in the fog. She didn't flinch, but I noticed her hand tighten around the coffee pot. "You've seen it, haven't you?" she whispered. "The highway." I nodded. Her shoulders slumped. "Then you need to be careful. That road doesn't just appear. It invites. And once it knows you're looking, it don't stop calling." A silence fell between us, broken only by the hum of a flickering light overhead. She stared out the rain-streaked window. "It took my brother, you know, back in '94. Never found his truck. Just stopped existing. Before I could ask more." An older man in the far booth stood up and shuffled toward us. His steps were slow, deliberate, boots soaked, as if he'd walked through the storm itself. He wore a patched coat and a wide-brimmed hat, and when he reached the counter, he didn't speak to the waitress. His eyes were fixed on me. "If she's seen the road," he said, his voice a dry rasp, "then she's already too close." I opened my mouth to speak, but the look he gave me rooted me to the spot. Cold, knowing. That road chooses, not you. I asked the man what he meant, how a road could choose. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed and soft at the edges. He slid it toward me without a word. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a hand-drawn sketch, crude but clear. A road winding through pine trees, leading to nowhere. Along the margins were names, dozens of them, written in faint pencil. At the very bottom, one name stood out, Clara M., my aunt's name. "You keep that," he said, turning to leave. "It's not a map. It's a warning." I stared down at the list, fingers tracing the edges. The pencil was smudged, but the names were real, each one marked with a single line through it. Except for mine, which wasn't there yet. The waitress leaned in close and whispered, "That man lives out near the ridge. Folks say he used to be a sheriff before the disappearances started. Keeps to himself now. Says the rain talks to him." I tried to laugh, but my throat was too tight to make a sound. Back in the car, I unfolded the paper again. Each name was a reminder that something about this town, this road, was more than folklore. I glanced up at the sky, where clouds were gathering fast. A low rumble of thunder crawled across the horizon. I drove toward the edge of town, not really sure why. Maybe I needed proof. Maybe I needed to see if the road would come back again. The rain began as a whisper, then thickened quickly into a steady curtain that blurred the world around me. As I passed the old church, my headlights flickered. The radio, which had been silent, crackled to life with a burst of static, then silence. Then, softly, like a voice underwater, a single phrase. Don't let her follow. My breath caught. I turned the volume down, but the message didn't repeat. I pulled over, heart racing. The road ahead curved sharply, and there it was again. Highway 47. Slick. Shimmering. As if it had risen from the rain itself. But this time, there was something new. A figure, standing at the bend. I couldn't see details. Just a silhouette, tall and still, cloaked in shadow. It didn't move. Didn't gesture. Just stood, watching. I blinked, and it was gone. The road remained, shining faintly in the storm. I started to reverse the car, but found my hands frozen on the wheel. The engine idled, and the wipers squeaked rhythmically across the glass. Somewhere deep in the trees, I thought I saw lights, dim and flickering, like lanterns swaying in the dark. I didn't know whether to go forward or turn back. I chose to turn back. My tires splashed over the soaked pavement as I pulled away. From the curve, heart pounding like it wanted out of my chest. The figure was gone, but its presence lingered, not just in my mind, but in the feel of the air itself. Dense, watching. As I passed the church again, I noticed its windows glowing faintly. For a split second, I thought I saw someone watching me from behind the glass. A woman, with eyes like mine. Then the light blinked out. Back at the house, the rain hadn't let up. The clouds hung lower than before, heavy and restless, like a ceiling waiting to collapse. I placed the folded map on the kitchen table, beside the journal. My fingers hovered over both. Clues, warnings, echoes. I poured myself another cup of coffee, hands unsteady, and walked to the living room. I didn't bother turning on the light. The dim gray from outside was enough. The suitcase still sat, in the guest room, untouched, though I swore I had left it closed, and now the zipper was halfway open. I knelt in front of it. My fingers hesitated at the zipper, but curiosity overpowered fear. Slowly, I pulled it the rest of the way open. Inside were only a few items. A raincoat, soaked and muddy, though I had never worn it. A cracked photograph of Aunt Clara standing in front of a car I didn't recognize, and a key. Old iron, with a blue tag tied to it. The tag had one word scribbled in faded ink. Wait. I turned the photo over. A date was written on the back. October 19th. Yesterday. I stood too quickly, the room spinning for a moment. October 19th. That was the date circled in Clara's journal, the day he came to the window. But the photo looked far older, the colors faded with time. I stared out the front window. Rain slithered down the glass like fingers, warping the view. The house across the field was dark, its windows empty, but something shifted near the edge of the trees, a ripple in the shadows, almost like breath. I blinked hard, and it was gone. The lights flickered. Again. Then the house groaned. Not from wind, not from age. It was a sound I had never heard before, deep and hollow, like something exhaling beneath the floorboards. I stepped away from the window, clutching the key. I didn't know what door it opened, or what waited behind it, but I knew I wasn't meant to wait long. Something was pushing, drawing closer. The rain was no longer outside. I could smell it in the hallway now. Cold, metallic, and unmistakably near. I followed the scent, slowly, carefully, down the hallway, past the guest room, and the silent suitcase. The smell of rain grew stronger with each step, though no windows were open, no leaks on the ceiling. It was as if the storm had entered through the walls themselves. At the far end of the hall was a door I hadn't opened since arriving. The cellar door, leading to a place I hadn't thought about in years. I held the iron key in my palm. It was warm now, like it recognized something. The doorknob turned before I could touch it. Just a click. Soft, like a whisper in the dark. The door opened half an inch. I stared at it, frozen. A drop of water slid from the frame to the floor, forming a perfect circle at my feet. I knelt and touched it. Ice cold. I pushed the door open fully, revealing the stairs below, cloaked in shadow. A soft light pulsed from below, flickering as if blown by wind. But there was no wind, only stillness, and the faint echo of something moving down there, not walking, but breathing. Each step I took creaked beneath me, the wood swollen from moisture. The smell of wet stone and decayed leaves filled the narrow passage. As I reached the bottom, I saw the source of the light, a lantern hanging from a hook in the low ceiling. Beneath it, on the dirt floor, lay another photograph. I picked it up. It was me, standing at the bend of Highway 47, staring at something just out of frame. My hands were at my sides, my face unreadable. I had never posed for that photo, and yet it was real. Footsteps echoed behind me, slow, deliberate, heavy. I turned, heart climbing into my throat. No one was there, just the narrow stairway leading back up into the house. But the sound persisted. I backed into the corner, clutching the photograph. Something passed just beyond the shadows, brushing the edge of the lantern light. My breath caught. I whispered, "Aunt Clara?" But the only response was silence. And then, from behind me, the quiet click of a lock turning. I spun around. The cellar door had closed, not slammed. Closed gently, like someone tucking me in. I ran up the stairs 2 at a time, but the knob wouldn't turn. I was locked in. From the other side. I pounded on the wood, heart thundering, but no one answered. Then I heard it, faint and distant. The sound of a car engine idling outside, a door slamming shut, and a voice I recognized from the diner, murmuring through the floorboards. "You look too long. Now it sees you." The cellar door creaked open at dawn. I didn't hear footsteps, no turning of the knob, just the slow groan of the wood retreating. Light from the kitchen bled down the stairs like fog, and the cold scent of rain faded as I climbed. My muscles ached, my hands scraped from beating on the door. I'd spent the night on the dirt floor, too afraid to sleep, clutching a photograph of myself that shouldn't exist. As I stepped into the house, everything felt wrong, like something had entered while I was locked below. The kitchen clock was frozen at 3:13. My phone wouldn't turn on. I checked the front door, which I knew I had locked, and found it wide open. Outside, the road shimmered faintly in the early light. Not Highway 47 this time, but my own driveway, curving subtly, impossibly, to the right where it never had before. I shut the door hard, bolted it, and turned to the key still in my pocket. It had gone cold again, almost brittle. I placed it on the table and pulled the old map from beneath the journal. The map was old, yellowed, the ink faded. It showed the surrounding towns, creeks, back roads, all the familiar places I knew from childhood. But the more I stared at it, the more I noticed something strange. A long stretch of land between Hollow Vale and the state line was completely blank. No roads, no names, just a pale void that looked almost erased. I flipped the map over. On the back, scrawled in Clara's handwriting, were the words, "It wasn't always missing." I found a red marker and traced the paths I had driven the past few days. My route back into town, the road to the diner, even the turnoff where I'd first seen the strange fork. They all intersected with that blank space. It didn't make sense. I had driven there, stood there, heard voices and seen the figure. The road existed, but only during the rain. That blank part of the map. It was Highway 47, hidden, erased. I shivered and checked the window. The sky was clear for now, but heavy with promise. A knock at the door startled me so sharply I nearly dropped the map. 3 soft raps. Then silence. I crept to the peephole, expecting no one. But there stood the man from the diner. Same hat, same soaked coat, even though it hadn't rained since dawn. He wasn't wet this time, just damp, like the humidity clung to him. I opened the door a crack. His eyes met mine, unreadable. "If you found the map," he said, "you need to see the hill." I didn't ask which one. I already knew. We didn't speak during the drive. He sat in the passenger seat, hands folded neatly, eyes fixed on the horizon. The only sound was the hum of the tires and the occasional chirp of insects disturbed by our passing. The road he directed me to was old and cracked, half swallowed by weeds, barely visible unless you already knew it was there. We drove higher, the forest thinning, until we reached a hill that overlooked the valley below. He motioned for me to stop. "Look there," he said, pointing with a trembling hand. From that vantage point, I could see the entire stretch of land I'd traced on the map. The blank space. And yet, something shimmered faintly in the low-lying fog. A bend in the trees. A glint of dark pavement that shouldn't be there. It was subtle, like an afterimage burned into the world, visible only from above. I stared, heart pounding. The road was real, just hidden, waiting. The man beside me whispered, "It doesn't always show itself, only when it wants to, when someone calls it." I asked him who had called it last. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he pulled out a photograph from his coat pocket, old, creased black and white. It showed a woman standing at the edge of the road, raincoat clinging to her like skin. Her face was turned away, but the shape of her shoulders, the tilt of her head, it was unmistakably Clara, my aunt. "She thought she could resist it," he said softly. "But some roads don't lead anywhere. They just circle back and take something each time." We drove back in silence, but as we neared the house, I noticed something strange. A car was parked in front, unfamiliar, old-fashioned, covered in a thin layer of grime, as if pulled from a different decade. The license plate was rusted, unreadable. I stopped behind it, unsure what to do. The man beside me stiffened, "Don't go inside," he said. "Not until the rain comes." I turned to ask why, but he was already stepping out of the car, walking away down the driveway. I watched him disappear into the trees without another word. Left alone, I approached the strange car. Its windows were fogged, but I could make out shapes inside. A coat, a bag, something that looked like an old radio. The door wasn't locked. Against every instinct, I opened it. A rush of cold air spilled out, sharp and metallic. The interior smelled of wet fabric and mildew. On the passenger seat sat another photograph, face down. I turned it over with shaking hands. It was me again, standing at the hill, staring down at the valley. But I had never seen a camera. I backed away from the car, heart hammering, the photograph still clutched in my hand. My breath fogged in the air, though the temperature outside wasn't cold enough to explain it. The trees surrounding the house seemed taller somehow, leaning in slightly, like spectators inching closer to the stage. I looked toward the porch. The front door was ajar. I hadn't left it that way. Slowly, I approached, half expecting to hear footsteps, voices, anything to break the oppressive quiet that had settled over everything. Inside, the silence was absolute. No creaking floorboards, no distant thunder, not even the ticking of the kitchen clock. I closed the door behind me and locked it, feeling the heaviness of the key in my pocket again. The map was still on the table, but something had been added to it. A small red X, drawn in the blank space. I hadn't marked it. My hands trembled as I traced it with my finger. That was the place I had seen from the hill. The center of whatever this was, I returned to the guest room. The suitcase was open wider now. The raincoat inside had shifted, slightly, revealing something underneath. A small journal, bound in cracked green leather. I picked it up and flipped through the first few pages. The handwriting was familiar, but not Clara's. It was mine. Or at least it looked like mine. Notes, thoughts, phrases I hadn't written, yet somehow remembered. The road isn't a place. It's a memory. A wound. I dropped the journal, breath catching in my throat. Thunder rolled in the distance, soft and low like a growl just beneath the horizon. I went to the window. The sky had darkened without warning, storm clouds rolling in fast. Rain began to tap at the glass, gentle at first, then harder. The kind of rain that came from nowhere, sudden and full. I looked down the driveway. Highway. 47 was back, clearer than ever. The shimmer was gone. It was solid. Calling. I stepped away, but the house groaned again, as if reacting to my hesitation. Lights flickered overhead. The radio in the living room crackled to life with a burst of static, followed by a faint whisper. She turned back once. You can't. I stared at the speaker, heart pounding. The voice had no gender, no tone, just cold certainty. The kind of voice that didn't ask. It told. I reached for the journal again, flipping to the last page. There, in the same handwriting. At the third visit, it opens. This was the third time I had seen the road. And this time, I wasn't sure I'd be able to look away. I stood at the doorway with the key in my hand, unsure if I had picked it up or if it had found its way into my palm. The rain outside was heavier now, blurring the trees, soaking the ground until the whole landscape shimmered with motion. Highway 47 waited beyond the driveway, cutting through the world like a scar. It looked clearer than ever, almost inviting. But something told me that clarity was a lie, that the closer it came to being real, the more dangerous it became. I opened the front door. The scent of petrichor and ozone washed over me. The road pulsed with wet blackness, as if breathing. Beneath the storm, I stepped onto the porch and paused. The red X on the map burned in my memory. The photograph from the car still lay heavy in my jacket pocket. I could feel the weight of myself in it. A future version, a reflection of what I might become if I stepped onto that road again. I knew I wasn't ready. Not yet. Thunder cracked overhead. In the distance, I saw movement, not in the trees, but on the road. A figure, tall and unmoving, stood at the bend once more. No umbrella, no motion. Just watching, always watching. I backed into the house, locking the door behind me, breath ragged. The key in my hand vibrated faintly, as though reacting to something outside. Or something inside. I turned and saw the cellar door, slightly ajar again, a soft trail of muddy footprints leading down. I didn't follow. Not this time. I closed the door slowly, the wood groaning under my grip, and leaned against it with my full weight. The house creaked and sighed like it understood. I grabbed the journal, the map, the photograph, and the old green notebook. I placed them all in the suitcase, zipped it shut, and slid it beneath the guest bed. If I was going to confront the road, it wouldn't be today, but I knew I couldn't run from it either. It had marked me, and it was waiting. That night, the rain continued without pause. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the whisper of drops against the windows. Somewhere beyond sleep, I heard the faint hum of tires over wet asphalt. Not near. Not far. Just there. A presence outside time. And as my eyes drifted shut, one thought repeated like a heartbeat. The road doesn't take you all at once. It takes you piece by piece, visit by visit, until one day you forget which way is home. The fog rolled in just after midnight. Not the light mist that sometimes drapes the trees, but a heavy, wet blanket clung to everything, muting the world into silence. I awoke with the sense that someone had whispered my name, so close I could feel the breath on my cheek. But the room was empty, and the rain had stopped. The air smelled of damp earth and smoke, as if the fog had dragged something through the woods with it. I pulled a sweater over my arms and crept to the window. Outside, the world was unrecognizable. Trees were reduced to ghostly outlines, and the driveway had vanished entirely beneath the thick white veil. I pressed my forehead to the glass, heart fluttering. Then I heard it again, faint, distant, carried on the fog like a forgotten melody. A voice, female, soft and slow, repeating a name. Not mine, someone else's. But it filled me with a deep sense of grief, as if I'd known the person once and failed to protect them. I stepped away from the window, the boards cool beneath my bare feet. The house felt heavier now, like the walls were breathing. I moved quietly through the hallway, pausing at the guest room. The suitcase was still there, but the raincoat had shifted again, revealing the photograph. It was curling at the edges now, as if touched by moisture. I picked it up. My eyes in the image seemed darker than before. Not because of shadow, but as if something behind them had changed. Downstairs, The radio crackled to life on its own. Static at first, then a low, garbled whisper. I approached slowly, heart pounding, and listened. The words came in fragments, buried in the static. She walked into the trees, didn't scream, never looked back. Then silence. I turned the dial, but every station returned the same fuzz. No music, no talk, just the sound of something trying and failing to speak. I unplugged the radio, but the static continued for a few seconds before cutting off completely. Stood still, listening. The fog outside pressed harder against the windows, like it wanted in. The lights dimmed and flickered, but never fully died. Then came the second voice, not through the radio, but from the field behind the house. A low humming, rhythmic and wordless, rising and falling like a lullaby sung underwater. I moved toward the back door, every instinct screaming against it. But I needed to see. I needed to know what waited inside the fog. The door creaked open, with a resistance that felt alive, like the hinges were reluctant to release me. Cold fog poured in immediately, brushing against my skin like a damp veil. I stepped onto the back porch, the boards slick beneath my feet. The humming grew louder. It wasn't coming from a single point. It surrounded me, vibrating faintly through the ground. I scanned the field. The trees at the edge were barely outlines, tall and swaying gently, their limbs reaching into the haze like fingers. I walked slowly, each step measured, careful not to lose the house behind me. The fog clung to my arms, dampening my clothes, stealing warmth. As I reached the middle of the field, I saw it, a shape among the trees, a small structure, a cabin, one I knew hadn't been there before. Its roof sagged, and its wood looked too old, too weathered, like it had been abandoned for decades. But its windows glowed faintly from within. A soft amber light pulsed behind the glass, flickering like candlelight. The humming stopped the moment I stepped closer. Silence fell over everything, so absolute it rang in my ears. I stood at the threshold, heart drumming. The door of the cabin was slightly open. I reached for it slowly, my fingers trembling. The wood was damp and cold beneath my skin. I pushed the door open, expecting it to groan, but it didn't. It swung inward soundlessly, revealing a single room, empty except for one object in the center, an old reel-to-reel tape recorder. The machine was already running. Its reels spun silently, tape sliding over the heads, recording or playing. I couldn't tell. I stepped inside, the floor creaking beneath me, and approached it. Next to the recorder sat a pile of tapes, each labeled with a name and a date. I scanned them, breath caught. Some of the names matched those on the map the man had given me. Disappeared people. Clara's name was there too, and beside it, mine. Dated tomorrow. I staggered back. My knees buckled and hit the wood floor hard, sending a jolt of pain up my spine. I stared at the machine as the tape clicked to a stop. The room dimmed slightly, and in the silence, a voice emerged from the recorder. My voice. But not from today. It was older, wearier. If you're hearing this, it said, then you've already gone too far. The road doesn't end where you think it does. It ends here. The tape clicked again. Then silence. I sat frozen, staring at the recorder as if it might speak again. My voice, but aged, altered, had warned me of something I couldn't yet understand. I reached out and lifted the tape labeled with my name. My fingers trembled as I held it. It felt warm, faintly pulsing like it had a heartbeat of its own. I turned it over. On the back, written in the same faded ink as the others, were 4 words: "Play when it rains." A distant rumble of thunder echoed outside. I grabbed the tape and bolted from the cabin, back into the fog. The moment I stepped outside, the humming returned, louder now, as if the fog had been waiting for me. I didn't look back. I sprinted across the field, the cabin vanishing behind me like it had never been there. The house came into view through the shifting mist. A blurry silhouette against the thick air. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it, breathing hard, soaked in cold sweat and rain. Inside, the silence was worse than the noise had been. I held the tape to my chest, unsure where to put it, unsure if I even wanted to hear what was on it. But curiosity and dread are twin flames. They burn the same way. I returned to the guest room, placed the tape gently on the nightstand, and stared at it for a long time. Then I pulled the covers over me, fully clothed, and waited for sleep that never truly came. At some point, I must have drifted into a shallow dream. I was walking along Highway 47, the road endless, lined with faceless houses. Every window showed a version of me, older, frightened, angry, alone. I called out, but no one answered. Then I saw her, Clara, standing in the middle of the road, holding a lantern that flickered in rhythm with my heartbeat. "Go back," she mouthed. But her eyes told me a different truth, one I still didn't understand when I woke. When morning came, the fog had lifted, but the air was still thick with the memory of it. I found muddy footprints leading from the back door to the guest room, my room. Only one set, bare, narrow, soaked into the floor. I checked the windows. All were locked. The recorder was still where I'd left it, the tape untouched. But the suitcase had moved again. It now sat in the center of the room, zipped and upright, like someone had packed it, and was ready to go. I knelt beside the suitcase, hesitant to touch it. Its presence in the center of the room made it feel less like luggage and more like a message. Slowly, I unzipped it. Inside, everything was folded neatly. A raincoat, a flashlight, batteries, and a notebook I hadn't seen before. It was slim, wrapped in twine, and sealed with a piece of wax shaped like a pine tree. My breath caught. I hadn't told anyone about the trees, not even in my thoughts. I untied the twine. The pages were filled with short entries, fragmented, half erased, written in a hand that matched mine exactly. He waits when the fog is thick. Don't answer if they knock twice. The third time is the door. The last entry was only 2 words, circled again and again until the paper was torn through. "Bring tape." I looked across the room at the recorder, then back at the notebook. Whoever, whatever, had placed this here was guiding me toward something. But to what end? I stared at the tape labeled with my name. Rain began to tap against the roof. Again, soft at first, then steady. The timing was too precise to be coincidence. The message on the back: play when it rains. I loaded the tape into the recorder, heart pounding, and pressed play. The static hissed for a moment, then cleared. My voice emerged, older still, strained, like someone speaking through water. "You came back. You always do. But this time, You'll have to choose. Thunder rumbled in the distance, low and patient. The voice continued. There's something in the fog. Something that remembers. It won't let you leave until you understand what you've forgotten. Then silence. The tape kept spinning, but no sound followed. I reached out to stop it, but before I could, a knock echoed through the house. Once, then twice. I froze. Breath trapped in my throat. No one was expected, and the notebook had been very clear. Don't answer if they knock twice. The knock came a third time, but softer, slower, like the house itself was asking permission to come inside. I didn't open the door. Not that night. Not with the rain speaking in knocks and voices that mimicked my own. I stood still for what felt like hours, the recorder silent now, the tape long finished. When I finally moved, I unplugged it, wrapped the tape in cloth, and stuffed it into the suitcase. I didn't know where I was going yet, only that I had to leave before the rain asked again. By morning, the clouds had broken slightly, revealing a weak sun and a sky still stained gray. I drove without a plan, following the old roads that curved away from Hollow Vale, trying to trace the edges of what I had seen on the map. I passed forests that seemed too quiet, gas stations that looked abandoned despite their flickering signs. Around noon, I spotted a faded billboard by the highway. Sleepy Pines Motel, vacancy, 3 miles ahead. Something about the name pulled at me. I took the turnoff without thinking, letting instinct guide me more than reason. The motel sat nestled in a grove of crooked trees, its paint peeling, its sign half lit and buzzing faintly. I pulled into the gravel lot. Only 2 other cars were there, one covered in leaves, clearly untouched for weeks. The office door creaked as I entered. A bell jingled overhead. Behind the counter, a man stood with his back to me, flipping, through a ledger so old it looked like it belonged in a museum. "Room for one?" he asked, voice raspy, without turning. I said yes. He slid a key toward me. No ID, no forms. "Room 9, he said, finally meeting my gaze. His eyes were pale, almost cloudy. "It faces the woods. Don't draw the curtains if it rains." I asked him why, but he only smiled, thin and tired. "Because the ones who did aren't here anymore." My hand froze on the key. I glanced at the ledger. Names were written in tight columns. Some crossed out. Others smudged to the point of vanishing. Near the bottom of the current page, a space was blank, waiting. I took the key. Room 9 was at the far end, its door warped and frame slightly crooked. The number had been painted over, several times, the layers peeling like dead skin. Inside, the air smelled of mold and old pine cleaner. A twin bed, a desk, a flickering lamp. Nothing else. I dropped my bag and sat on the edge of the mattress, the key still in my hand. Thunder rumbled softly in the distance. I hadn't checked the forecast, but somehow I already knew what was coming. The rain began again just before sunset. A slow, methodical tapping against the metal frame of the window. I remembered the man's words and left the curtains closed, but the temptation itched in my fingers. What would I see if I opened them? Would the woods be there, or something else? I tried to distract myself by unpacking the suitcase, laying the journal and the tape on the nightstand. The pages fluttered slightly, even with the window shut. The room felt like it was breathing. I turned on the lamp. Its dull yellow glow cast long shadows along the cracked wallpaper. The air buzzed faintly with electricity, as if the storm had soaked into the walls. I flipped through the notebook again. Near the back was a new page I hadn't noticed before. The ink was fresher, still slightly wet. It read, "Look under the mattress, but not for too long." My hand shook as I set the book down. The rain tapped louder, impatient now. I stood, approached the bed, and lifted the mattress slowly. There was a ledger beneath it, much smaller than the one in the front office, and bound in black leather. I opened it. Inside were lists of names, each paired with a room number. Most had a date beside them. Some had a word: checked out, left, forgotten, taken. My eyes stopped on one page in particular. Room 9. There were 3 names listed. 2 were crossed out. The third had no name, just today's date. I stared at it, throat dry. My fingers brushed the page, and the ink smudged slightly, as if still fresh. I put the book back and lowered. The mattress, heart thudding. The storm deepened, the rain thickening into a curtain against the building. Then came the sound, soft at first, like wind against the window. But it wasn't wind, it was humming. That same low, rhythmic lullaby I'd heard outside the cabin. It seeped through the walls, into my bones. I pressed my palms to my ears, but it didn't stop. It wasn't sound anymore. It was presence. Memory. Something was remembering me. I backed away from the bed and sat against the far wall, curling my knees to my chest. I tried to hum something else, anything, to push it out, but the melody twisted itself around mine, matching it beat for beat. Then suddenly, silence. Total. Like the world had been muted. I looked to the window. The curtain was swaying. Not from wind, from movement behind it. A shape, tall, still, waiting. I didn't move. I couldn't. The shape behind the curtain didn't shift or breathe, but I felt it watching. Not just from outside, from within me. Like it knew things I hadn't told anyone. Things I had forgotten. Slowly, I reached for the recorder on the nightstand. My hands were slick with sweat, and the weight of the machine felt heavier than before. I loaded the tape again. The one with my name. The one marked, "Play when it rains." The storm roared louder as I pressed play. My voice returned. Not the version from the last recording, but something more desperate. "Room 9 is a door," it said. "But not the kind you open. It opens you." I swallowed hard. The voice continued. "He watches from behind the glass. Don't let him in. Don't answer the knock." Then the humming returned. Not from outside, but from the recorder itself. As if the machine had swallowed something it couldn't contain. The reels kept spinning, even as the tape should have ended. The curtain swayed again, wider this time. I stood slowly, recorder in hand, and approached the window. Each step felt like walking through water. The humming grew louder, impossibly layered with hundreds of voices beneath it. Whispers, names, dates, pleas. I reached out and touched the curtain's edge, heart rattling in my chest. A single breath fogged the glass from the outside. Then came a tap, not a knock, a finger. one long, slow line drawn down the pane. I yanked the curtain open. The window was empty. No figure. No fog. Just darkness, and the reflection of my own terrified face. But something was different. My reflection blinked slower than me, moved its hand a heartbeat late. I staggered back, the recorder slipping from my fingers and hitting the floor with a hollow crack. The humming stopped, and the light in the room died, leaving me in a darkness so thick it felt like drowning. I scrambled to the door, flung it open, and stumbled into the hallway. The motel was silent. No hum. No guests. No signs of life. I turned toward the front office, but the hallway was wrong. Too long. Too curved. The wallpaper changed color as I moved. Doors disappeared where they had been seconds ago. Room numbers jumbled. Room 9 was no longer behind me. And when I looked down, the key was gone from my hand. I kept walking, hand against the wall to steady myself. The hallway stretched in unnatural ways, sloping slightly downward, though the floor remained level. My footsteps sounded distant, as if I were walking underwater. The doors on either side were changing as I passed, morphing from numbered rooms to unmarked slabs of dark wood. Some of them throbbed faintly, as if breathing. I didn't dare open any, not without knowing where they led, or if they would let me leave again. The end of the hallway revealed a stairwell I hadn't seen before, narrow, descending into complete darkness. A faint red glow pulsed below, soft and slow like a heartbeat. I took one step, then another, the walls growing tighter around me. The air smelled like rust and rain. On the third step, the humming began again, fainter now but familiar. It wasn't from the motel, it was from me. I realized I was humming, the same lullaby from the cabin. I didn't know when I'd started. At the bottom of the stairs was another door, not old and warped like the others, but newer. Clean. White. The kind you'd find in a modern home. I reached out, fingers shaking, and knocked once. The humming stopped. A silence so deep followed that I could hear my own heartbeat, echoing off the walls. Then, from the other side, a voice, my own again. Calm, measured. You were never checking in. You were always checking out. The doorknob turned slowly on its own. I ran, back up the stairs, through the warping hallway, past doors that moaned and sighed as I passed. When I finally burst into the lobby, the man behind the counter was gone. The ledger lay open, fluttering as if caught in wind I couldn't feel. My name had been filled in, no longer blank, and beside it, in faint gray ink, checked out. I slammed the book shut and fled into the storm, not stopping until the mall. Motel was a distant blur in my rearview mirror. I didn't look back. Not once. The rain chased me all the way home, and even now I'm not sure I ever really left that motel. Sometimes I still hear the humming in quiet rooms. Sometimes I dream of hallways that stretch forever. And sometimes, only when it rains. I find keys in my pocket that I don't remember taking. They're always marked with one number, 9. It's been 3 days since I left the motel, but the rain hasn't stopped once. Not a drizzle, not mist. A relentless downpour, as if the sky forgot how to close. I've checked the weather reports. They all say clear skies, sunshine even. But here, in Hollow Vale, the storm never lifts. The streets are empty. Power flickers. The air tastes of iron and old water. Something has shifted. This isn't just weather. It's something being kept alive, or being summoned. Inside the house, the walls feel thinner. Every sound from outside seeps in. The rain tapping like fingertips, the low rumble of thunder that never quite arrives. The clocks have all stopped, each frozen at a different time. My phone turns on but only shows static. Not on the screen, but through the speaker. A constant whispering hiss that grows louder when I near the windows. I don't check the windows much anymore. Not since I saw the figure again. He was standing at the edge of the field, same as before. Hat low, coat soaked, his face hidden by the storm's veil. But this time, I didn't look away. I stared until my eyes burned. And for a brief second, I think he smiled. Not a wide grin, just the ghost of something. As if he recognized me, as if he'd been waiting. I blinked, and he was gone. But the feeling stayed. That same hollow cold that fills a room just before something breaks. I found new pages in the journal. I hadn't written them, not consciously. The handwriting was mine, but the ink was darker, the letters more rigid. The latest entry read, "The rain is not falling, it's watching." I closed the book and placed it beneath a floorboard. I don't want to see what it writes next. Every object in this house feels like a memory trying to repeat itself. The suitcase, the tape, the photos. They all hum when I'm not looking. I sleep with the lights on now, though they flicker often. The candles I light don't burn evenly. Their flames tilt in one direction, always toward the door. I've started hearing footsteps again. Not heavy like before, but light, bare, and wet. As if someone is walking through puddles that don't exist. The sound moves from room to room, always stopping outside mine. It never tries the handle, but the door swells with pressure, as if something is leaning against it. Listening. This morning, I found a note slipped beneath the front door. No envelope. No handwriting. Just 5 typed words on aged yellow paper. Third visit opens the door. I burned it immediately, but the message is carved into my mind. I've seen the road 3 times now. Entered it once. Dreamed of it constantly. Each time it feels closer, as if it's trying to move into me, not the other way around. I don't know what the door is, but I fear I'm already standing on the threshold. To distract myself, I searched the attic, a place I'd never dared to enter before. The wooden stairs groaned under my weight, and the air grew thinner, the higher I climbed. The attic door was already open. I stepped inside and immediately knew something was wrong. The walls were lined with mirrors, all covered in black cloth. At the center, a single chair faced a small wooden table. On it, a reel-to-reel recorder identical to the one from the motel. Only this one was playing. I moved closer and listened. Static first, then a voice, faint, choked with rain. Not mine this time. Clara's. "The storm is a bridge," she said. "It doesn't lead away. It folds back. Every step you take is remembered by the place you left." I leaned closer. I tried to leave. I made it to the river. But the water rose, and the road followed. Then silence. The tape rewound itself, whirring softly, waiting to be played again. I didn't press play. I pulled the plug from the socket and left the attic without turning back. When I returned downstairs, the television was on. I hadn't touched the remote. The screen was black, but flickering with faint light, like a reflection without a source. Then, for a second, it showed me, not a recording, a live image. I was standing in front of the screen, wearing what I wore now, moving as I moved. But the version on the screen had something behind her, a tall figure in the hallway. I turned around instantly. Nothing. Just air and shadow. That was an hour ago. I haven't turned the TV off. It's still on, still black, but the light is gone. No more flickering. The reflection doesn't follow me anymore, but the screen is warm, like breath. I placed my hand against it and felt a pulse, slow and steady, not mine. The storm outside has gotten worse. The lights are fading more often. And somewhere deep in the house, I hear the soft turning of a doorknob. I moved room to room with a flashlight, sweeping the beam across every corner. Shadows clung to the walls like wet leaves, and each creak of the floor sounded like a footfall behind me. The door to the basement was open again. I knew I had shut it, locked it, nailed it even. But it gaped now, dark and yawning. I approached carefully, listening. No humming, no voices. Just a soft, rhythmic tapping, like water dripping onto stone far below. At the top of the stairs, I called out Clara's name, though I didn't know why. Maybe I still hoped for something human in all of this. Something I could explain. No answer came, but the tapping continued. I descended slowly, each step a negotiation with fear. Halfway down, the flashlight flickered and died. I stood in the dark, frozen, hand on the rail. Then, a new sound. Breathing. Not close. Not far. Just there. Present. Waiting. I turned and ran back up the stairs, heart thundering. When I reached the top, the house had changed again. The hallway was longer, the doors unfamiliar. The pictures on the walls were not mine. Black and white portraits of people I didn't recognize, each with their eyes scratched out. One photo had my house in the background. I stared at it for a long time. The woman in the foreground wore a raincoat, and the number 47 was stitched into her sleeve. Back in the living room, the candle on the table had melted completely, but the flame still burned, suspended in a puddle of wax, defying logic. I approached slowly. It flickered once and went out the moment I touched the edge of the table. A line of water spread across the floor beneath my feet, even though I hadn't come in wet. It led toward the front door. I followed it, half in trance, heart pulling toward something I didn't understand. When I opened the front door, the rain didn't fall. It rose. Sheets of water drifting upward like reversed gravity. And beyond it, on the edge of the driveway, stood the man in the coat again. But this time, he wasn't alone. 3 figures stood beside him. One shorter, one holding something. A lantern, maybe. The third was hard to see, almost flickering like bad reception. But even through the distortion, I recognized the shape. It was me. I slammed the door shut, my breath shallow, skin icy. The image burned into my vision. Myself, standing outside in the storm, but not quite me. A version of me faded by time, or distance. Eyes too hollow, posture too still. I backed away from the door, unsure if I had just seen a memory, a warning, or something worse. The water on the floor was gone now, absorbed or erased, but I could still feel it soaking through the soles of my feet. The recorder clicked on by itself. I hadn't touched it in days. A voice began to play. Clara again, but distorted, like she was underwater. "The rain keeps time," she said. "Not like a clock, like a memory. Every drop remembers." The tape hissed. "We leave pieces of ourselves behind, and the storm picks them up." Then a pause. "I didn't want you to follow me, but I knew you would." My hands trembled. She had known. Even before the first page of the journal, she had known. I lit another candle and placed it near the recorder. The flame wavered violently, then steadied. I picked up the green notebook. More pages had appeared, though I hadn't written anything. One line stood out, underlined in red. "The fourth time, it doesn't let you leave." I counted the appearances. 3. The next time the road came, the next time I stepped near it, I wouldn't be allowed back. Not whole, anyway. If I wanted answers, I had to be ready to lose something. That night, I didn't sleep. The storm raged louder, shaking the windows. I heard footsteps in the attic, then in the basement, then both at once. Whispers behind every wall. And beneath it all, that same humming, no longer a lullaby, but a dirge, a calling. I sat on the floor, surrounded by candles, map in front of me, tapes beside me, and the key clenched in my hand. I waited for the knock, but it never came. Only the sound of my own breath, trying not to echo. By morning, the house was dry. The storm had stopped, not moved on, but paused, holding its breath. The sun pierced through the window for the first time in days, but it didn't feel warm. It felt surgical, precise. A light meant to reveal, not comfort. And outside, at the very edge of the field, the shimmer had returned. Highway 47, clear, solid, silent. I packed the suitcase again. This time, I knew where I was going. I didn't know if I'd come back. I left just after noon, when the light was at its most indifferent. The suitcase sat in the trunk, humming faintly, as if it too knew where we were going. I didn't take the highway this time. I followed the back roads, the old paths that wound, through pine forests and past dried-out creeks. The radio stayed silent even when I turned the dial, only static. I tried not to look at the sky. The clouds were too still, too flat, like something had painted them there and forgotten to finish. The forest grew denser the farther I drove. Branches arched over the road like cathedral beams, and patches of fog clung low to the ground even though the sun still shone. Then, just beyond the curve near the old river bridge, I saw it. A car parked along the shoulder. Silver, mud-splattered, familiar. I slowed, heart climbing into my throat. It was the same model as mine, same dents, same missing hubcap on the rear, and in the passenger seat, someone sat still as stone. I parked a few feet behind it. The engine ticked as it cooled, but otherwise the world was dead silent. No birds. No wind. Just that same electric stillness that always meant Highway 47 was near. I stepped out, gravel crunching beneath my shoes, and approached the car. The figure in the passenger seat didn't turn, didn't breathe. As I got closer, I saw long strands of dark hair and a hand resting motionless on the lap. My hand, my hair, my face, but frozen, empty. I staggered back, breath caught in my chest. It wasn't a mirror. It wasn't a dream. It was me, or something made to look like me. A version stripped of will, drained of motion. I circled the car slowly, glancing inside. No keys, no ignition light. The fuel gauge rested below empty, and the dashboard clock blinked 4:47 over and over. I pressed my hand against the driver's side. Window, cold, slick. It felt like pressing into a memory, or a warning. Then the eyes opened, not wide, just enough to see me, enough to let me know it was aware, and it smiled. I stumbled backward, slipping on the damp gravel, heart hammering against my ribs. The figure in the passenger seat didn't move again. The smile remained, faint and unnatural, like it had been, etched into something no longer alive. I turned away, unwilling to look at it any longer. The road ahead glistened faintly, a ribbon of wet asphalt that hadn't been there before. Highway 47, revealing itself in pieces, luring me onward one, fragment at a time. I returned to my car and sat for several minutes, hands gripping the wheel. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked pale, distant, as if it were waiting for me to catch up. I started the engine. The radio hissed, then cut out completely. As I drove past the parked car, I didn't look again. I couldn't. But I felt its gaze, not the figures, but the roads. Like it had noticed my hesitation, and was adjusting itself accordingly. It wasn't just showing me things, it was learning. A few miles in, I saw another car on the shoulder, older this time. Rusted blue with flat tires. Its windows were fogged and the trunk was open. I didn't stop. I didn't want to know who had driven it, or how long ago. But the further I went, the more cars I saw, all abandoned, all with something left behind. A cracked mirror, a child's shoe, a single glove turned inside out. Pieces of people the road had tried to keep, or hadn't fully let go of yet. Then I saw the van. Brown, 70s style, with fading stickers on the bumper. It looked newer than the others, like someone had only recently arrived. The passenger door was open, and inside on the dashboard was a cassette tape in a clear case. No label, no dust, just waiting. I pulled over. Something told me this tape wasn't like the others, not left by the road, but maybe left for me. I took it carefully, not daring to look in the rear of the van. Back in my car, I slid the cassette into the recorder I'd brought. It clicked softly and began to play. A girl's voice, younger than mine, shaky. If you found this, I'm sorry. I thought I could map it, trace it. But it's not a place. It's an echo. And I think I'm the echo now. Static. Then a sound I hadn't expected. Breathing. My own. Matching my rhythm perfectly. The recorder clicked again, but the tape kept spinning even after the voice was gone. I ejected the tape and held it in my lap, watching the reel spin to a stop. The girl's voice stayed with me, not just in memory, but in rhythm. Her breath still echoed in my ears, perfectly aligned with mine, as if we were somehow sharing the same space. I opened the glove compartment and placed the tape inside, but the moment I closed it, the radio flickered back to life. Only static. Then, quietly, passenger door, check the seat. I turned slowly. The seat beside me was empty, or had been. Now, a damp impression marked the fabric, as if someone had just been sitting there. I hadn't heard the door. I hadn't felt the car shift. But I could smell rainwater and something faintly floral. Lavender, the same scent that had lingered in Clara's house. I reached over and touched the seat, still warm. I whispered, her name, barely audible, afraid to hear an answer. None came, but the air grew heavier. As I turned back to the road, I noticed something ahead, a gas station. Broken, flickering sign, long abandoned pumps. But the lights inside were on, casting a pale yellow glow through the fog. I hadn't seen it on the drive-in. It hadn't been there. I pulled in slowly, gravel crunching beneath my tires. The air smelled of rust and ozone. I stepped out, recorder in one hand, flashlight in the other, and walked toward the door. It opened before I touched it. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and old receipts. Shelves stood empty, their contents long gone. But at the counter sat a man, tall with a beard that looked like it had grown far too fast, like ivy choking a wall. He looked up at me, eyes glazed, voice gravelly. "You're late," he said. She was waiting. I asked who, but he didn't answer. He only slid a photograph across the counter. My hand shook as I reached for it. It was me, in the driver's seat, crying. There was writing on the back of the photo. Just 2 lines. "You've already taken the passenger. You just haven't noticed yet." I looked up, but the man was gone. The counter was empty. The photo was still in my hand, its edges curling from moisture that hadn't been there a second before. I turned toward the door, and the fog outside was thicker now, moving. Not swirling, but crawling, like something blind trying to find the cracks in the world. I stepped back outside, the fog pressing in on all sides like hands. The gas station had vanished behind me before I'd taken 10 steps. No lights, no structure, just mist in the shape of my car, barely visible. I opened the driver's door, slid into the seat, and froze. The passenger side door was open again. I shut it quickly, not daring to look at the seat. I could feel it, something left behind, or something that had never really gone. The silence was no longer comforting. It was hungry. The engine hesitated, then roared to life. The headlights barely cut through the fog, but the road was still there. Highway 47, clean, endless, no turns, no signs, just forward. I drove slowly, every part of me alert. Somewhere far behind, I thought I heard footsteps. Not on gravel, on glass. Like someone walking across a mirror. I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. Mirrors show things we're not ready to see. After what felt like hours, I spotted a figure on the shoulder. Not the man in the coat, but a woman. She turned as I approached. It was Clara. Not as I remembered her, but younger. Maybe even my age. Her eyes met mine and she smiled, gently, almost sadly. I slowed, rolled down the window. She didn't speak. She only pointed to the road ahead. "It bends," I said softly. "It never did before." She nodded once, then vanished into the mist. The road did bend, Gently at first, then sharper. The trees changed, taller, darker, their branches twisting in unnatural angles. Something in the air grew colder, thicker. My breath fogged the windshield from the inside. I wiped it with my sleeve, but it came back instantly. The tape recorder clicked once in the passenger seat. I hadn't touched it. A new tape had appeared, unlabeled, waiting. I pressed play without thinking. My voice again, but weaker, tired. "You've come this far," it said. "There's no turning back, but you already knew that." A pause. Then, whispered beneath, the words, "Check the mirror." I looked up. The rear view showed nothing but fog. Then, slowly, a shape emerged, sitting in the back seat, not moving, not speaking, just there, and smiling. I didn't scream. I didn't turn. I kept driving. The shape in the back seat remained still, and I tried to convince myself it wasn't there. Just fog, a shadow, a trick of reflection. But the mirror disagreed. It held the figure with clarity, even as the rest of the road blurred with rain. I felt the car grow heavier with each mile, the air inside thick with something unspoken. I rolled the window down slightly, hoping the wind might take it away. It didn't. The road narrowed again, trees pressing closer, limbs like skeletal arms reaching across the pavement. I drove slower now, headlights catching on shapes that weren't always trees. The tape recorder clicked off, ejecting the cassette, with a soft pop. The silence that followed was not empty. It was listening, watching, waiting for me to speak first. I gripped the wheel harder and focused on the curve ahead. I knew what waited there. He had always been waiting. I saw him just before the bend, tall, motionless, soaked in shadow. The man in the coat. He stood on the white line, head bowed, slightly, hat dripping with rain. I slowed but didn't stop. My fingers trembled against the wheel. As I drew closer, he lifted his head, and for the first time, I saw his face. Or what was left of it. Pale, empty, not scarred, erased, like something had wiped it clean. Eyes like hollow raindrops, lips unmoving. I stopped the car a few feet from him. The rain pelted the windshield, masking everything in motion. He raised one hand and pointed down the road. No words, no expression, just a gesture. I rolled the window down, and he stepped closer, boots silent on the soaked asphalt. His coat clung to him like a second skin. I whispered, "What are you?" But he didn't answer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and rusted, a key. He placed it gently on the hood of the car. Then he stepped back. 1, 2, 3 steps into the fog and vanished without a sound. I climbed out of the car and approached the hood. The key sat alone, catching drops of rain that hissed slightly on contact, as if the metal rejected the storm. I picked it up carefully. It was cold but pulsed faintly in my hand, not with heat, but with something older. A vibration that didn't belong to any metal I knew. It had no tag, no markings, just the smooth rust of age. I placed it on the passenger seat beside the recorder and slid back behind the wheel. The road ahead had changed. The bend was sharper now, almost unnatural, curving deeper into a part of the forest that hadn't been there before. The trees looked unfamiliar, too tall, too dark, like they had grown without sunlight. I turned the car slowly, following the line the man had pointed to. I drove in silence, the sound of the engine almost an intrusion. Every mile felt longer than the last, like time was folding inward. The fog returned, denser now, pulsing with breath. Then I saw them, signs along the shoulder. Small wooden markers, each bearing a name carved by hand. No posts, just nailed into the trees. Clara's name was the third. Mine was the fifth. The sixth one had no name, just a mirror nailed to the bark. I stopped the car and stepped out. The mirror reflected, not my face, but my back, as if I were already walking away. I turned quickly. No one was behind me, but I still felt the warmth of breath on my neck. I returned to the car, locked the doors, and continued down the road. Every part of my body screamed to turn back, but the highway offered no intersections, no exits, only forward. The rear view mirror remained dark, but I no longer dared to look directly into it. The rain had changed too, no longer falling from the sky, but rising from the ground in thin veils that reached upward. Like the storm had flipped, and gravity no longer mattered here. The tape recorder clicked again. No cassette inside. Just a sound, soft breathing, perfectly matched to mine. Then a voice, barely more than a whisper. He's still in the car. I froze. My eyes moved to the passenger seat. Empty. Then the mirror. Nothing. Then, from the floor behind me, the faintest creak of leather under shifting weight. I didn't turn. I didn't blink. I just drove. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to keep my hands steady on the wheel. The road narrowed further, the trees arching so tightly above me they blocked what little sky remained. My headlights flickered, as the rain began to fall upward again, streaking the windshield from bottom to top, like tears retreating into the clouds. I glanced once at the glove compartment. It pulsed, not moved, pulsed, as if something inside was alive and waiting to be let out. I passed another marker. This one had no name, only a date. Tomorrow's. My breath caught. I didn't slow down. The trees beside it trembled, though there was no wind. Then, far ahead, I saw lights, dim and flickering, like lanterns or candles lining both sides of the highway. They stretched into the fog, forming a path I couldn't ignore. I followed them. The further I went, the more I could feel the weight of the car increase, like the road was pulling me deeper into itself. Suddenly, the engine cut out. The lights died. The car rolled to a stop on its own, coming to rest in the center of the glowing path. I turned the key. Nothing. The dashboard was dark. Even the rain had gone still, frozen mid-air like beads of glass suspended in a photograph. I opened the door. The air outside was warmer now, thick with moisture and scent. Wet bark, rusted metal, and something faintly sweet. I stepped onto the asphalt, and the ground pulsed beneath my feet. The lanterns hummed, softly, harmonically, a low vibration that seemed to come from within my chest. Then I heard him, not from behind me, from within me. His voice, the man in the coat. You brought the key. You brought the echo. All that's left is the door. I turned slowly and found it. A wooden door standing alone on the road. No walls, no frame, just suspended in space, its surface damp, breathing. I stepped closer. Every instinct screamed, but there was no going back. Behind me, the highway had vanished, swallowed by the fog, erased like a line wiped from a page. I placed my hand on the knob. It was warm, vibrating. I thought I heard voices on the other side, hundreds, maybe thousands, whispering in every tone I had ever spoken. I closed my eyes and turned it. The door swung open without sound, revealing not a room, but a reflection. Not in glass, in space. I saw myself standing there, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, but I wasn't moving. She was. The other me blinked, stepped forward, and tilted her head, not with curiosity, but recognition. She mouthed something I couldn't hear, and I understood anyway. One of us must stay. My hand dropped from the knob. She didn't vanish. She waited. Behind her, the space twisted. Trees spiraled inward like a vortex, and the rain moved, sideways, frozen in midair yet writhing with purpose. I saw glimpses of places I remembered. Clara's house, the attic, the motel room, even the gas station. But they were different now. Faded, inverted, as if they were only ever reflections, cast by the road itself. The me across the threshold extended a hand. Her palm was wet, her eyes hollow. I stepped back. She stepped forward. The boundary between us wavered, like heat over asphalt. The hum in my chest grew louder. The recorder in the car clicked once, more. A voice I didn't recognize, not mine, not Clara's, whispered, "Choose." And I realized that I had, long ago, when I turned down that road the first time, when I opened the journal, when I followed the voice. There was never another path. Just this. Just her. Just me. I closed the door. The hum ceased instantly. Silence fell so thick it pressed against my ears. The lanterns flickered out one by one, plunging the road into darkness. But the fog remained, glowing faintly with an internal light. I turned back toward the car. It was gone. The highway was gone. Only the door remained, and a trail of footprints behind me. Mine, but wrong. Too deep, pointing the opposite way I had walked. I stood alone in the dark, the key still clutched in my hand, and whispered, "What now?" The answer came not in words, but in the wind, a shift, a breath, a pull. The door creaked open again behind me. This time, I didn't look. I just walked. The moment I stepped through, the world changed. Not with thunder, not with light, but with silence. A deep, humming silence that pressed against my skin like cold fabric. I wasn't in the forest anymore. I wasn't on the highway. I stood in a vast expanse of gray, rain falling in slow motion, never reaching the ground. The sky churned above, thick and roiling like boiling water, but no drops touched me. I walked forward, though there was no road, no path, just direction, inward. The ground beneath me wasn't ground. It pulsed gently underfoot, like the back of a sleeping creature. Each step echoed faintly, but the echoes came before I moved. I whispered a word, my name, and heard it spoken back to me in 100 voices, some younger, some older, some that had never belonged to me at all. I kept walking. The light changed with each breath, shifting from gray to blue to violet, never bright, never dark, always uncertain. Shapes began to form at the edge of my vision. Houses half-built, windows suspended in the air, familiar rooms floating sideways, the interior of Clara's attic, upside down, the motel hallway, stretching endlessly into fog, a child's bedroom, mine, untouched since I was 7. I passed them like ghosts, each pulsing faintly with memory, with rain. I reached out once, toward the outline of a mirror hanging in empty space, but my hand passed through it like mist. The glass rippled and whispered, "Not yet." Then I saw the road again. Highway 47, just as I remembered it, but endless. Floating, stretching into a horizonless sky of rain. I stood at its edge, unsure if I had found it or if it had found me. A single signpost jutted up from the mist beside the asphalt. No words, just a symbol, a spiral, etched in rusted metal. I touched it, and a door appeared in the middle of the road. Not standing, but lying flat. A trap door, waiting to be opened. Knelt beside it, and placed the rusted key into the lock. It turned with a sound like wind moving through leaves. The door lifted on its own, revealing a staircase spiraling down into soft golden light. I hesitated only for a moment. Something below called to me, not with urgency, but with inevitability. Like it had always known I would come. I took a breath, stepped onto the first stair, and began to descend into the rain. The staircase was longer than it appeared. Each step creaked beneath me, not with weight, but with memory. Sounds of laughter, crying, whispers I hadn't heard in years. The walls glistened with condensation, reflecting moments from my life like panes of living glass. I saw Clara at the kitchen table, writing in her journal with a candle burning beside her. I saw myself as a child, staring out a rain-covered window, humming a melody I hadn't known had words. The deeper I went, the warmer the air became, heavy with the scent of rain-soaked soil and old cedar. The staircase curved endlessly downward, but I never tired. I never stopped. The light at the bottom shifted with every turn, sometimes golden, sometimes blue, sometimes green like the forest before it stormed. I began to feel a presence walking just ahead of me, always one corner out of sight. Sometimes I caught the swish of a coat or the creak of a step, but never a face. Then I heard her, Clara, not calling my name but singing softly, the lullaby I'd heard since the beginning. It drifted through the space like fog, familiar and ancient. I followed the sound until the stairs ended, and I emerged into a wide room that felt impossibly large. A circular chamber, walls lined with doorways, dozens, maybe hundreds. Each door was different, styles, colors, materials, some pulsed with light, others breathed. In the center of the chamber stood a tree, not dead, not alive, suspended. Its roots curled into the misty floor, and its branches extended upward into shadows I couldn't see. Hanging from the branches were objects, keys, cassette tapes, photographs, shoes, rings, a single mirror. As I approached, the tree vibrated slightly, as if acknowledging me. One of the keys glowed faintly, swinging without wind. I reached out and took it. Cold, familiar. Mine. One of the doors creaked open behind me. I turned and saw a hallway, identical to the motel's but older. Cracked, the wallpaper peeling in wet curls. At the far end stood a figure, coat, hat. Still, the man. He raised his hand and pointed at the key. No words, just that gesture again. Then, slowly, he stepped into the darkness and vanished. I followed him. The hallway seemed to stretch and contract with each step, as if resisting my presence. The floor was wet beneath my feet, not with water, but with something thicker, like memory given shape. Each door I passed whispered softly, not in words, but in sensation, regret, guilt, longing. One door pulsed red, and I felt a heat rise in my chest. Another was cold as stone, its handle frosted with unspoken grief. I kept walking, the key heavy in my hand. At the end of the corridor was a single elevator, old-fashioned, with a brass gate and a cracked floor indicator. The button lit up before I pressed it. I stepped inside, unsure whether the machine moved or the world shifted around me. The floor display glitched between numbers, letters, and symbols. Then it stopped on a symbol I recognized. The spiral. The same as the signpost. The doors opened. I found myself in a room made entirely of glass. Rain poured down all sides, but none of it reached me. In the center of the room was a table. On it, the journal, the cassette recorder, the green notebook, the photograph, and the mirror. All the items from the house. From Clara's life. From mine. They had followed me here. Or I had brought them unknowingly. I sat down, suddenly exhausted, and opened the journal. The final page was blank. Then, word by word, letters began to appear. My handwriting, forming a message. This is the 4th time. I froze. The breath left my lungs. That was what the notebook had warned. The 4th time meant no return. I stood, ready to run, but there was no door, no exit. Just the glass, the rain, the table. The reflection in the mirror now showed me, not how I was, but how I would be, eyes hollow, face wet, mouth silent, and behind me in the reflection stood Clara. I turned slowly. She was there, not a ghost, not a vision, but solid, real, or as real as anything here could be. Her clothes were dry despite the rain on all sides. Her eyes looked tired, but kind. She didn't speak, just stepped forward and placed her hand over mine, pressing the key between our palms. I wanted to cry, to ask her why she left, what all this was. But my voice had gone somewhere far, swallowed by the walls of this place. She led me back to the table. One by one, she placed each object into the suitcase. The journal, the notebook, the recorder, the photo, the mirror. Finally, she closed it and slid it toward me. I understood. It was mine now. The burden, the memory, the map. You won't forget again, she said softly, her voice low and thick like the storm. But you won't remember either, not until the next door opens. Then she stepped backward into the rain beyond the glass. It parted for her, folding around her form as she walked into the fog. I tried to follow, but the walls remained firm, the glass cold and absolute. The suitcase pulsed once, like a heartbeat. The elevator behind me chimed. The doors opened on their own. I picked up the suitcase and stepped inside. As the doors closed, I looked once more into the mirror. This time, there was no reflection. The elevator dropped. The elevator didn't stop. It dissolved. One moment I was falling through space. The next I was standing on damp pavement under a moonless sky. The rain had returned, gentle but endless, soaking through my clothes and into my bones. I looked around. I was on Highway 47 again. Not a dream, not a memory. The real one. The fog rolled in soft waves over the road, and the trees whispered with every breeze. But this time, it felt different. Like the road was waiting for me to speak. I took a step forward and the pavement responded, a low groan, as if the surface itself remembered the weight of my footsteps. I walked slowly, past places I recognized not from life, but from the dreams. The motel, the gas station, the hill where I'd seen the shimmer, all present, all distorted. They flickered at the edges, blending into the rain like watercolor left out in the storm. I saw no people, no cars, just echoes. The road wasn't empty, it was full of everything it had taken. As I passed the gas station, I saw the man in the coat again. He stood near the pump, head bowed, hands tucked into pockets heavy with keys. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge me. But something in the way he stood told me this was the last time I would see him. I nodded, once. He didn't return it. But one key slipped from his hand and hit the wet concrete with a metallic thud. I didn't pick it up. I kept walking. Further down the road, the signs began to change. Not names, not symbols, but memories, written on metal, etched into rust. She waited. He forgot. You knew. Each one stabbed like a whisper, too close to the ear. I saw Clara's name, then mine, then blank spaces, rows of them, waiting to be filled. I tried not to read, but they read me. Every thought, every hesitation reflected back in crooked letters. The road wasn't showing me these things. It was remembering them through me. Then I saw the bend, the place where it had all begun. The turnoff I'd almost taken, the shimmer in the storm. It was still there, but now the shimmer was gone. The road was solid, complete, final. I stood at the edge, the suitcase in my hand, and realized I wasn't carrying it anymore. It was carrying me. Every step, every choice, every word spoken into a recorder, every breath in the rain. I looked down the path and whispered, "I'm ready." I stepped onto the path. The suitcase grew heavier with each footfall, not in weight, but in memory. Moments I hadn't thought about in years pressed into me like rain against skin. Clara's laugh at dusk, the smell of her old kitchen. The first time I heard my name, whispered from an empty room. The road didn't just lead me forward. It led me back, threading me through everything I'd tried to forget. And all of it was still here, waiting like unopened letters. The rain intensified, not in volume but in presence. It became a second skin, coating every inch of air with tension. The trees leaned in closer, their trunks wrapped in vines of old cassette tape and notebook pages soaked and torn. I passed a tree with photographs stapled to its bark. All of me, All different, all impossible. In one I was laughing, in another crying, in another gone-eyed and hollow. I reached out, but the images dissolved at my touch. The road curved once more, leading me to a place I had only seen in fragments, the house. But not Clara's. Mine, or at least a version of it built from overlapping memories and shadows. The windows flickered with candlelight. The door was slightly open. I walked up the steps, each one groaning beneath my weight like a warning. I stepped inside and was greeted by silence. Pure, whole. Not absence of sound, presence of stillness. The living room held no furniture, just water pooled across the floor, reflecting a ceiling that wasn't mine. I crossed it slowly, and with each step, the reflections showed different versions of me. Younger, older, wounded, distant. At the center of the room sat the recorder. The final tape already loaded, the button blinking red. The suitcase unlatched itself beside me. I placed the recorder on top and sat down, cross-legged like a child waiting for a story. I pressed play and heard myself say, "You are the story." The voice on the tape, my voice, was calm, steady, but layered with something else beneath it. Echoes, as if 100 versions of me were speaking in tandem, slightly out of sync. "You were never just a visitor," it said. "You were the keeper, the carrier, the thread that ties this place together." I listened, breath held, while the recorder continued. "The road remembers what the world forgets, and so do you." The water on the floor rippled. Around me, the house began to change. The walls shifted from wood to stone, from stone to fog, from fog to nothing. Memories drifted in and out. Clara at the window, the man in the coat watching from the trees, the fog pressing against the glass. All the pieces of the journey formed a spiral around me. The suitcase clicked shut on its own. The candlelight in the windows vanished. Only the soft hum of the tape remained, now fading into static. I stood slowly. The recorder ejected the final tape and melted into the suitcase without a trace. I picked it up and turned to leave, but there was no door, just an archway of mist, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. The path beyond was made of light, dim, gold, steady. I stepped into it, unsure whether I was walking forward or backward. The moment I passed through the arch, the rain stopped. Not just around me, everywhere. I knew it without seeing. The storm was over. Then I saw them. All of them. The people the road had taken, returned now in form or feeling or memory. Clara stood among them, her hands folded, her eyes soft with knowing. She nodded. So did the others, faces I recognized from newspaper clippings, photographs, dreams. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Their silence was complete. A farewell, a blessing, a release. The weight in my chest lifted, not because it was gone, but because it had been understood. And when I turned back, Highway 47 was gone. In its place was only earth, soft, damp, untouched. No sign of pavement, no shimmer in the mist. Just wildflowers, pushing up through the soil and trees arching over an ordinary clearing. I took one final step forward, and the weight of the suitcase disappeared. It had vanished from my hand, as if it had never been carried, or as if it had always belonged to the road, and the road had let it go. The silence was no longer heavy. It was full. I breathed in the scent of the trees, the earth, the sky, clean, new, permanent. A breeze stirred the leaves, and with it came the faintest echo of a voice, drifting like music. You won't forget again. I closed my eyes. For the first time, there was no humming, no footsteps behind me, no knock at the door. Just the sound of the wind carrying things away. Somewhere behind me, the mirror cracked. Not violently, but gently, like a truth setting itself free. The sun broke through the clouds, casting long beams of golden light across the clearing. I looked at my hands. Dry, steady, whole. I didn't know where I would go next. The world beyond Hollow Vale felt distant, unreal, but it was waiting. I turned toward the trees and began to walk, not as someone who had escaped something, but as someone who had passed through it and returned different. Not cleansed, not broken, remembered. As I reached the edge of the clearing, I saw something nailed to a nearby tree. A sign, hand-carved in old wood. I stepped closer, heart quickening. It read, "You were here, and that matters." I touched the rough letters with my fingertips and felt the hum once more. Faint, familiar, but no longer inside me. It belonged to the place now, to the rain, to the road, and it would wait for someone else, someday, because memory never truly ends. It only shifts. And as I stepped into the sunlight, leaving the shadow of the road behind, I carried nothing but a quiet certainty in my chest. Some places never forget. Some doors never close. And Highway 47 would always be there, waiting for the rain. When the rain begins to whisper and the wind forgets its name, there's a road that finds the dreamers, those who've walked too close to flame, not paved in stone or memory, not marked on map or line, but in echoes, loss and longing. It appears to those out of time. It does not call with thunder, nor beg with flashing lights. It waits in silent hunger for the hearts that roam at night. Each footprint leaves a question, each glance a thread undone. And once you see it shimmer, the journey has begun. You may leave it in the daylight. You may swear it's gone for good, but the road remembers softly, as only silence could. So if rain taps on your window and fog curls through your door, listen closely, then remember, you've been here once before.